Hello, everyone. Tonight we are wandering deep into a desert where the wind carries no scent. The sky is so wide it feels judgmental, and every grain of sand has witnessed more than you ever will. You're not here on purpose, nobody ever is. But you've been drawn to something, a shape, a pattern, a thought, someone, or something left behind. It's not a structure or a fossil. It's not a message scrawled in bone. It's a spiral. You kneel beside it now, one knee crunching into hot sand that smells faintly like flint and sweat. The spiral is shallow, freshly drawn. It curls inward like a question. No footprints surround it. Whatever made this didn't walk, it swam through dust, whispering a thought into the land. And you're the unlucky one who stumbled across it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And, hey, where are you watching from? Drop your country and your local time below. I always check. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You don't see the lizard yet, but you feel it. Not in a sixth sense way, let's not get dramatic, but in that weird mammalian chill that comes when your brain says, oh, no, we're not the cleverest thing here. You're not. Not tonight. Not here. The sand shifts near your boot almost lazily. A tongue flickers up once, then a tail narrow and scaled and just long enough to give you the impression that this thing could wrap around your ankle and judge your regrets. It doesn't. It ignores you. The lizard moves in a slow arc, dragging its hind limbs through the softest portion of the dune. The front claws make almost no impression. The tail, however, is the pen. With it, the lizard inscribes something intentional, a spiral, about 3 hand widths wide, its edges uneven, but its intent unmistakable. This is not territory marking. This isn't hunting. This is meditative, weirdly polite. One spiral finishes, another begins. You count 4. Each curls clockwise, each a bit deeper. The sand inside seems cooler, holding traces of moisture, not enough to drink, but enough to hint that the spiral serves more than aesthetics. Historians still debate whether ancient peoples first copied spiral symbols from seashells, weather patterns, or creatures like this. No one mentions desert lizards. That's probably because no one wants to believe a creature with eyeballs that look like boiled marbles might be smarter than a Sumerian priest. But hey, you're here. You're watching it. It's spiraling. What now? You step closer. The lizard doesn't flinch. If anything, it scoots around the spiral's edge like a monk tidying a garden. It stops. Stares at you. Then with a motion somewhere between graceful and sinister, it flicks sand over the spiral. Half buries it, not fully, just enough to blur the design. You wonder if that means stop watching. Instead, you pull out your old notebook, the one you haven't used since that cave expedition with the geoglyphs, and sketch the spiral. A rough sketch, sure, but functional. Then against all better instincts, you reach down and run your fingers over the half-buried edge. Warm at the top, cool toward the center. There's something there. You dig not deep, just a few centimeters. Beneath the surface, layered like pastry, are insect wings. Paper-thin, brittle, not chewed. Offered, stored, preserved. There's no sign of feeding, no droppings, no blood. Weird side fact. Desert locusts can remain dormant in sand for 20 years waiting for rain. You wonder if the lizard's spirals somehow preserve these bugs for when the rains finally return. You whisper aloud. Are you a fridge or a philosopher? The lizard doesn't answer. It's already starting a new spiral 10 paces away. Night settles in awkwardly the way it always does in deserts, too fast and too quiet. You light your headlamp. The beam catches dozens of faint disturbances in the dunes nearby. Spirals, dozens of them. Some big enough to lie in, some too small for anything but a thought. You crouch beside one and notice something curious. Not a single spiral overlaps another. Each has its own space, like respectful roommates with clearly labeled food containers. That's more than you can say for most humans. You feel a pinch in your left calf? Ants? Great. You slap it and mutter something unrepeatable, then look back to the lizard's last known location. Gone. The spiral's still there, untouched. Clean lines, silent thoughts. Then the wind starts. The desert wind is not like the oceans. It doesn't howl, it chatters. Like teeth. It picks up sand flings. It rearranges the whole surface in seconds. The spiral you just examined vanishes beneath it as though embarrassed to be seen. But the deeper ones they hold. As you walk between the dunes, you think about memory. Yours. The lizards, the sands. What if memory didn't live in the brain? What if it lived in loops of action, repeated so often they left physical scars in the world? Some researchers suggest that certain animals, octopuses, elephants, pigeons, can recall trauma not just in their minds but in the places where those things occurred. Places become memory holders. So maybe this lizard is doing the same. Not recording thoughts, not erasing them, burying them. You press your palm to the warm sand again and wonder if something thought too hard about sorrow, would it spiral deep enough to forget? A soft rustle behind you. Another spiral begins. You're not alone out here. You see it now. The spiral maker. It's not just any lizard, not the scuttling kind you'd see flickering between rocks. This one moves like a slow-thought contemplative steady, with limbs too elegant for its dust-worn body. Its skin is cracked into mosaics of rust and ochre, as if it had grown straight from the sun-baked cliffs. Its eyes don't blink. They rotate slow and glassy as if studying not your face but your intent. And there's something hanging from its mouth. A single thread of damp sand like it's just licked the Earth's memory. You want to name it. Humans love naming things, but nothing feels quite right. Scribe Duna wrote, Oracle. Instead, you watch in silence as it drags its tail in a perfect arc again. This one's wider. It takes longer. It spirals outward, not in. The curve is slower, each circle a little wider than the last. If you were standing on a rock ledge, it might resemble a sundial or the grooves of a vinyl record. A memory plays in your head, an old desert tale about a god that whispered in circles so mortals would never find the center of truth. Back then you laughed at it. Now you're not laughing. Now you're squinting at a reptile that's been looping its tail across the same patch of dust for 15 minutes like it's writing an epic no one will ever read. The tribe that lived here before long gone sand-swallowed mythologized, called this creature Kasineth, meaning something between thought that returns and he who draws water from dry land, which is wild considering this thing can't even blink. Still, historical accounts from early desert settlements record sightings of large spirals appearing overnight, always near shallow basins that would later fill with water after rare cloudbursts. Coincidence? Maybe. But some believe the lizard doesn't just mark the land, it predicts it. Historians still debate whether those markings were interpreted or merely appropriated by humans desperate for direction. You're beginning to suspect it doesn't matter. The spiral finishes. The lizard steps to the center, flattens its belly against the cooler sand, and exhales a low clicking sound. Not a hiss, not a growl. A sound like wind pressing through a reed flute. And then it starts another. But this time something changes. Instead of dragging its tail, it uses its hind claws, carving grooves deeper than before. It moves slower. Now maybe tired, maybe focused. You notice something unsettling. The spiral is no longer symmetrical. One side is thicker. The other looks pinched, as if the lizard is deliberately distorting the thought it's burying. Why? You kneel beside it, whispering, "You okay, buddy?" and instantly feel ridiculous. Still, the lizard pauses. And then, like it's answering, you see something glitter in the spiral's center. A shard. You pick it up. It's smooth and amber-colored, light enough to be resin, old enough to smell like forgotten tree bark. Inside a gnat. Perfectly preserved. Wings outstretched in its final motion. Suspended in time. Odd fact. Amber is one of the few materials that can preserve the three-dimensional behavior of ancient air bubbles. In some, we found atmospheric traces from over 90 million years ago. You wonder if this lizard knows what it's doing, leaving you this tiny sarcophagus of silence. You tuck it away and rise, sand sliding from your knees. The lizard moves on, spiraling again. This time you notice the first spiral was memory. This one might be intention. Its tail lifts slightly, leaving breaks in the pattern. Tiny hesitations, pauses, commas. Could it be a language? Or are you just losing your mind to the heat? That's the danger of deserts, isn't it? Not the thirst, not the scorpions. It's the way thoughts echo too loudly in your own skull. You start to imagine patterns, meanings, conversations that were never said aloud. And maybe that's what happened to the people who came before. The ones who tried to live beside the spiral makers. Maybe they started decoding the curves, following them, believing the lizards were teachers. Some evidence suggests they even mimicked the spirals in their own rituals. One site, long buried but remembered in oral tales, supposedly had a floor of crushed shells arranged in overlapping spirals. Each was hand-placed, echoing a lizard's walk. The tribe's elders said these helped them think under the earth. You used to roll your eyes at that. Now you're not so sure. You crouch again, tracing the latest spiral's ridges with a single finger. The sand's warm, but beneath it's cool. And again you find something, a carapace. Cracked, empty. An insect husk, maybe a cicada, gleaming faintly silver in the lamplight. So what are you looking at? A larder, a calendar. An autobiography in curls. The lizard is already 20 feet away now, carving another spiral, this time intersecting a shallow ridge in the dune. And then it does something strange. It stops, not in the middle, on the edge, and just stands. You realize it's waiting, and then a second one appears. This one's smaller, dust-colored, with a stubbed tail. It slinks toward the spiral's far end. The two don't touch. They never touch. But they spiral in tandem, one clockwise, the other counter. Like dancers orbiting an unspoken agreement. You feel an ache in your chest. It's not poetic. It's the dryness, probably, but something about it feels not lonely, just precise. Like each lizard has its place and it's never the center. You jot something in your notebook. Thought isn't linear. It coils. Maybe that's why stories loop. Above the stars begin to appear one by one faint pinpricks that don't care whether you understand or not. And behind you, 3 more spirals begin. You're not following the lizard anymore. You're following the pattern. That's how it starts. Right? You think you're watching a creature, but really the creature is watching the world. You just happen to be in the way. The sand is full of stories you never asked to hear. And tonight, those stories are spiraling outward like soft-spoken arguments no one will ever win. You hike over the ridge where the lizard last disappeared. Your boots sinking deeper now. The desert is shifting beneath you, slightly wetter, as if the sand here remembers the last rain more fondly than it should. Then you see it. Not a lizard this time, a shape, something buried. The spiral here isn't fresh. It's old, partially collapsed, faintly shaded from the wind. You nearly step over it before noticing the curl of rib bones rising from the middle like a skeletal sundial. Insect shells glitter around it, dry and scattered. But beneath the ribs, just peeking out from under the sand, is a pattern. You kneel and begin brushing carefully. More spirals. But these aren't new. These are etched into something harder, stone? No, not quite. Clay. Fired in the sun. A disc cracked into pieces, each with a groove scored deep into the surface, matching the spiral shape exactly. Someone made this. Human hands. Centuries ago. You lift one shard. It's heavier than you expect, smoother on the back. There's a symbol, a sun with a hole through it. Not stylized, primitive. And faint beneath the spiral center is the impression of a claw. The lizard walked across this once. Or maybe it was placed there for the lizard. You glance around. Spirals. Not just in sand now, but in broken stone, burnt wood fragments, even the outline of old buried tents. Whatever happened here wasn't random. Someone camped here, lived here, died here. Historians still debate whether early desert cultures used animal behavior to map their movements, or whether those patterns were imposed in hindsight, the way people turn constellations into bears and spoons. But here it feels deliberate. You dig further, your fingers clawing until your nails scream. More shapes emerge. A flattened insect casing with golden edges, a lizard's desiccated toe curled inward. And then, beneath it all, a smooth arc of stone with something carved deep into it, another spiral, but this one shaped like a flower blooming in reverse. You pause, listen. The desert is not quiet. It whispers. The wind moves in loops. The insects click in threes. The land isn't silent, it's just structured. And maybe that's what the lizards are doing. Structuring silence. Somewhere between the ridges, another spiral begins. You glance over and see it, the original lizard slowly looping again. But this time you see something new. As it spirals, it pauses at intervals. Not random. Spaced. It scratches twice with its left hind claw, then drags the tail. Repeats. You count. 7 segments. 7 was sacred to many early cultures. The 7 stars of the desert night. The 7 directions: north, south, east, west, above, below, within. You mark each interval with a pebble. As the spiral widens, you place the pebbles outward, tracing the pauses. Soon, a pattern forms, not just a spiral, but a sequence, like music, or code, or memory. A sudden gust smacks you in the face, sand biting your cheeks like dry laughter. You squint and hunker low. The spiral vanishes again, half buried by the wind's tantrum. But your pebbles remain. Anchors. Beats in a song you weren't meant to hum. Odd fact. Some ancient desert insects use vibration patterns in the sand to locate each other long before sound carries. Entire species communicate underground, never making a sound above it. You begin to suspect the lizard isn't alone. You follow a new set of spiral tracks, smaller, messier, shallower. They lead toward a collapsed dune, almost like a spiral that was never finished. And there you find it. A dead lizard, curled, desiccated, one eye still glossy like it didn't quite finish blinking. Around it, 3 half-spun spirals, interrupted. You feel weirdly guilty, like you've stumbled into someone's unfinished letter. You lean in. One of the spirals has been marked, not just carved, but layered. Bits of shell, threads, a thorn, a feather, each pressed into the groove like offerings. You think of burial mounds, offerings to ancestors. Or perhaps the lizard was trying to preserve something it didn't want to forget. You sit beside it and whisper, "I don't know what you were trying to say." But the wind answers. It always answers. It just doesn't always make sense. You stand brushing yourself off and look to the west. There beyond the ridge, you spot something different. Not a spiral. A shape. Angular, human-made. You approach carefully, stepping over half-collapsed spirals like they're graves. And there it is, a cairn. A low stone mound with spiral carvings all around the base. Not deep, not decorative, functional. Inside the cairn, a bowl, cracked but intact. Inside the bowl, sand. Just sand. But pressed into the center, another spiral, smaller than your palm. You lean closer. It's not carved, it's burned. The char marks curl inward, the ash faint but present. Someone maybe recently, maybe centuries ago, left a fire-marked spiral as a final thought. Was it for the lizard, or from the lizard? You feel like you're about to sneeze, but it's not allergies. It's your brain trying to sneeze out a truth that's buried just below the surface. The sun slips lower. The lizard spirals once more. And in that moment, the air feels thoughtful. The wind comes hard now, not with the usual hiss, but with that bone-dry snarl that makes you squint and taste sand behind your teeth. It comes fast, too fast. The kind of gust that remakes the landscape in under 5 minutes, turning old paths into rumors. You throw your scarf over your mouth and duck low behind a ridge. You're not new to deserts, but this wind wants to erase you. When it passes, the land is different. You scan the dune you were just on, gone. Flattened like a pillow someone punched. But then your eyes widen. The spiral remains. Not all of it, just the center. Still there, clear as day, the ridges firm as if a god had placed a lid over it, while the rest of the land screamed. Not a coincidence. You crawl toward it, brushing sand away. The spiral's base is deeper than you expected, at least a hand's width into the dune. The lizard didn't just carve this, it invested in it. You start to understand something unsettling. These spirals aren't surface thoughts. They go down. You press your palm to the center. It's cool. Again. Despite the wind, despite the sun, despite the screaming dryness of everything else. This one little curl of sand remembers stillness like a cellar. You grab a stick, a piece of dry root, probably ancient, and jab it down into the spiral's core. It sinks deeper than it should. There's air underneath. You pause, then start digging with both hands. Minutes pass. Your breath turns shallow. Sand fills your shoes and braids itself into your sleeves. But eventually, you strike something solid. Clay! You scrape it free. A curved lid. No, a tunnel. Wide enough for a lizard. Smooth on the inside, coated in something that glistens faintly mucus. Hardened resin. You don't want to know. And the smell, not rot, not even moisture. Dust, but ancient dust. Like you just opened a tomb that had been buried before your entire language was born. Odd fact. Some desert reptiles create burrows that act like heat batteries, cool during the day, warm at night, cycling air through microchannels no human would notice. Engineers still argue whether these systems are instinct or accident. Historians still debate whether such behavior in prehistoric times was mere evolution or whether some form of primitive memory, what they call geological cognition, guided these creatures to map terrain through their bodies. You lean into the spiral tunnel. It doesn't echo, but it hums. Not like a machine, like silence under pressure. You whisper, "What did you bury here?" And that's when something shifts below. You jerk back, not a tremor, a sound. A single click. Sharp, metallic no. Just precise, like something waking up. You sit still, completely still. Minutes pass, and then you see it. A lizard. Not the rust-colored one. This one's paler sand-colored with translucent lids and smaller limbs. It emerges slowly, head first, flicking sand from its snout, tongue tasting the air. It ignores you, passes by, then stops at the edge of the spiral and starts digging. Only this time it doesn't spiral outward. It goes in. Each motion is a subtraction. Each clawed gesture removes what another had added. It's not building, it's unbuilding. You blink and realize something terrible. This spiral wasn't a message, it was a lock, and now it's being undone. The smaller lizard reaches the tunnel, sniffs once and disappears inside. The sand shifts behind it, sealing like water. You sit there, stunned, brushing sand from your arms like it might change what just happened. And then you see something glitter near the edge. Another shard of amber. You pick it up. This one's different, inside a hair. Not animal, human. Curled black, impossibly preserved. Who buried this? When you remember the cairn, the burnt spiral, the offerings at the dead lizard's side. This wasn't random. You're not just walking through a desert. You're walking through a library made by creatures that don't speak and never look you in the eye. You take a long drink from your canteen. The water's warm and metallic. Still, it helps you feel real again. And then you remember something the old tracker told you once. The desert doesn't hide things. It just stacks them out of reach. So you mark the spiral with a loop of cord, pin it down with a rock, and sketch the whole thing in your notebook. Not because you'll understand it, but because someone maybe years from now will come looking for something they lost. And this might be it. As you rise to your feet, the wind picks up again. But this time it swirls around the spiral like it respects it. Not erasing, just bowing. And behind you, somewhere beyond the ridge, a new spiral begins to form. You spend the next hour watching it return. The same lizard rust-colored, slow-footed, undistracted, emerges from behind a slope like it never left. It slinks back toward one of its older spirals and pauses at the edge. Not out of confusion. No, This is a creature that knows exactly where it's been. The pause feels reverent, like standing outside a locked room you once cried in. And then it begins again. Same claw, same tail. But this time the movements are different, slower, more deliberate. The spiral deepens not wider this time, but down. Each rotation is pressed firmer, tighter, as if it's burying something it can't afford to remember aloud. You whisper, "You came back for it." And maybe it did. You lie on your stomach watching from a few feet away. The wind is gentle now, brushing your neck like a reminder that you're made of dust too. You catch a faint scent, sun-baked clay laced with something richer, almost sweet. It's coming from the spiral. Curious, you reach forward. Press 2 fingers into the spiral's outermost ring. The sand is warm, yes, but beneath it a trace of something oily. Resin. You pinch some between your fingers and hold it to your nose. A memory flashes behind your eyes, not your own. Or maybe it is. Something about a cave, a scream, a cold sunrise. The lizard lets out that low fluting click again, the one you first heard on the night of the first spiral. Then it stops, breathes, eyes half-lidded, tail twitching like a meditating monk's sigh. It's doing something ancient, not nesting, not hunting, preserving. Odd fact. In certain Saharan rock shelters, archaeologists discovered caches of small bones, wrapped in fibrous bundles buried beneath spiral arrangements of crushed pigment. The purpose remains unknown. The local tribes believed they were memories the wind asked to keep. And now you're watching something similar, only this memory has scales and breath. Historians still debate whether early burial practices began with death or with memory. That is, did we start burying corpses? Or the unbearable ideas they left behind? This lizard has no corpse, only an action. You shift slightly, brushing your notebook. You almost forgot it was there. Inside, your hand-sketched spirals look clumsy now. Imitation without understanding. But still, you keep drawing. Because maybe that's what humans do, copy the mystery until it becomes ours. The lizard begins a second spiral overlapping the first, but this one curves differently. Not a full circle, a hook, a curl, a deviation from the norm. You blink and realize what it's doing, sealing it. This is no longer an open spiral. It's closed, folded in on itself like a door pulled shut behind a secret. And you gotta watch it happen. You murmur goodnight, not knowing why. The lizard flicks its tongue once, then slips away again back into the dark folds of a dune that looks exactly like the last 3 dunes you crossed. But you know now none of them are the same. You stand brush off of the sand and realize your boots are buried almost ankle deep. You've been lying still a long time. You turn slowly, looking over the desert from this small crest. Dozens, maybe hundreds of spirals mark the shallow flats, some fresh, some collapsed. A graveyard of thoughts buried in loops in silence. You notice something strange then, a single spiral glowing faintly in the starlight. Not from light, from symmetry, from perfection. It's the one the lizard sealed. You feel a tug inside your chest, not sorrow, not wonder, just a question, an ache. You walk to it. At the center you dig. Not much, just a finger's depth. You hit something smooth. A shard of dark stone, triangular, with one side polished to a mirror sheen. Not obsidian, something else. It's not sharp, just heavy and cold. You hold it up. It reflects the stars like they're being remembered. You pocket it. Somewhere inside you, the realization is forming that these spirals aren't just thoughts. They're containers. You look back at the dozens of other spirals. You could dig each one, but you won't. Not yet. Because something in you believes the desert has rules, and you've just broken one. You don't know how you know. You just do. Back on the ridge, a new spiral begins. This one faster, frantic. You see the tail flick? The pace is wrong, desperate. You don't approach it. You leave that one alone. Instead, you hike toward a newer part of the dunes, far from the sealed thoughts. There you find a clean patch of sand, smooth, untouched. And with the end of your walking stick, you try your hand at it. A spiral. Wobbly, ugly, but yours. And then you pause. Step away. Because maybe, like the lizard, you're not trying to tell anyone something. Maybe you're just trying to let it go. The old ones once said, "Follow the spiral and you'll find the river that forgot its name." You always thought that was a poetic way to get children lost. But now, with the stars out and the wind drawing breath between gusts, you begin to suspect the phrase wasn't metaphor. It was cartography. You're walking now. Not toward the nearest settlement, not toward your vehicle, but toward the edge of a low salt basin where spirals dot the flats like snail shells frozen mid-migration. They vary in size. Some are no larger than a coin, others could fit a child. All seem etched with intent. You remember hearing that nomadic caravans once used spirals as directional beacons. The shapes weren't just messages, they were navigation. Back before compasses, back before roads, when you trusted creatures that never lied to the earth beneath them. Odd fact. Several ancient caravan routes were later discovered to align with natural magnetic anomalies, slight fluctuations in the crust that early humans couldn't measure but some animals could sense. Perhaps these lizards were among them. You squat near a particularly large spiral. This one is complex 5 loops deep, each trench smooth. Not fresh, but not old enough to collapse either. Just balanced. You press your fingers into the outer loop and feel warmth. The spiral leads somewhere, so you walk, not with urgency, but with attention. Every 10 steps, a new spiral appears. Some overlap slightly. Others fork into double loops. You mark the turns in your notebook. You've stopped trying to explain it, you're just following the rhythm now. Then, you see at a ridge of stone barely peeking through the sand, arched like a whale's back. On it, 7 spirals have been carved, not etched, carved. By tools. Human hands. You crouch to examine the closest one. The grooves are narrow, clean, and oddly uniform. Not tribal marks, not decorative, purposeful. Each spiral seems to have an inlaid slot at its center. You brush away more sand and find a sliver of metal lodged in one. A compass needle, rusted, still magnetized. You blink. Historians still debate whether ancient desert dwellers developed tools for geomagnetic reading or simply followed the patterns of animals. But this is both. You're standing on a prehistoric navigation altar, spiral beacons and magnetic alignment. Half instinct, half invention, a map made by minds that didn't care whether they were human or not. You step back and look out across the basin. The spirals lead outwards in every direction like water channels, each path curling just enough to suggest that the journey matters more than the destination. You follow the western arc, and then there it is. An ancient water cache. Not a well. A song trap, as the tribes once called them. A place where sound collects. The land curves just right, catching rain, catching echoes. You clap your hands. Once. The echo returns a second later, warped, spiral-shaped. It feels like memory. You check the sand near the center. It's damp. Not puddled, but damp. You dig, slowly. 2 inches down, your fingers hit stone. Flat. Scratched. You uncover it inch by inch until a symbol emerges. A spiral, but one you haven't seen before. Not horizontal, vertical. As if someone tried to show a spiral reaching downward into the earth rather than across its surface. And at its center, a dent. Not natural. You drop a pebble in. It bounces twice. Then the faintest plunk. There's water down there. You sit back stunned. This spiral led to a water pocket. The lizard wasn't just preserving thoughts. It was mapping survival. You look out at the other spirals glowing faintly in the silver moonlight. Each one might mark more than memory. They might be resources. Echoes of rainfall, resonant soil, insect nests, cool burrows, edible roots. Each a coded archive of continuity in a land that pretends to forget. You take another drink from your canteen. This time you sip slowly. You sit beside the spiral a while longer. There's no need to rush now. You're not lost. Not really. You're within a system. You're following something older than direction. Oddly enough, your feet hurt less out here. Your thoughts feel lighter. Maybe that's what the spiral does. Maybe it removes everything unnecessary until only the motion remains. The spiral this time is wrong. Not broken, just disturbed. You don't notice it at first, not until your foot hits something hard buried beneath a shallow curl of sand. You kneel, brush it off. A skull? Human, small, jaw cracked at the hinge like it had one last thing to say and forgot the words halfway through. You draw back instinctively, and then you look around. There are more, not scattered, not dumped, placed. Each skeleton curled in the fetal position, each resting in the center of a carefully shaped spiral. The bones have been cleaned by time. No tools, no scavenger marks, just patience and sand. You whisper to no one. Was this a burial site? But it's more than that. You notice it now. The spirals around the bodies aren't deep. They're shallow. They weren't meant to contain anything. They were meant to warn. And you apparently didn't take the hint. You trace one spiral carefully, counting its turns, 7.5, tapering outward like the lizard's early work. But this wasn't made by a tail. These were made by fingers. Human, clumsy, inconsistent, panicked. You reach into your pack, unroll the old field map you forgot you'd packed. The ridge, the cairn, the salt basin. You mark the bones. They form a shape. Not a spiral this time, a coil. Like something that tried to imitate the spiral but got caught in its own logic. A mimic. A misunderstanding. Odd fact. In multiple ancient civilizations, spirals and coils meant entirely different things. One was eternal return. The other constriction, entrapment. Mistaking one for the other could mean following a sacred path or getting stuck in a death loop. And here it seems someone followed the wrong one. You move on, quietly now. The next spiral is tight, dense. You don't notice the bones this time. You notice the voice. It's not a voice like words. It's a sound, faint, high-pitched, carried by the breeze. A kind of whistling that flutters just at the edge of hearing. You follow it, naturally. It leads to a half-collapsed spiral partially covered in thorny brush. Beneath the brush, a hollow. Not deep, but intentional. Lined with shiny insect wings, all laid out symmetrically, overlapping like scales. At the center, a carved stone disc. You recognize it immediately. It matches the shard you found earlier. Same weight, same polish. Only this one isn't cracked. You pick it up. On its underside, a symbol, a spiral uncoiling into a straight line. A path. You glance back at the field of bones. Maybe they never saw this. Maybe they never made it this far. Historians still debate whether early peoples ever truly understood the meaning of spirals in nature or simply imitated them out of awe. But you're starting to believe the lizard understood it better than we ever did. And some humans learned from the wrong teacher. You hold the stone tight in your palm and continue walking. Further along the dune line, you reach a ridge where 3 spirals have been merged into one. At first, it looks messy, overlapping trails, broken arcs. But as you climb higher, you realize it's a map. Each spiral leads to a symbol, watershed, danger. The language is primitive but clear. And in the center of this triad, a massive spiral filled in. You climb toward it. When you reach the top, the view is breathtaking. Below, in the hollow of an old sinkhole, lies a perfect spiral 10 loops wide, descending inward like a staircase of soft sand. And at its heart, nothing. No bones, no stones, no insects. Just an absence. And that's when it hits you. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. An invitation. Odd fact. Some animal species are known to make decoy nests, structures designed not for use but for misdirection, to lure predators, to confuse rivals, or to lead the curious astray. You sit down at the spiral's edge. You don't go in. Not yet. Because for the first time, you're not sure who this was made for, or whether it's still waiting. You don't remember falling asleep, but you remember waking up. The desert's cold has crept into your bones. The sand beneath you has stiffened, and the stars above have rotated just enough to make you feel like time skipped without permission. You sit up slowly. Joints cracking in protest, the spiral map still visible in the bowl of the sinkhole below. Still untouched. Except now there's something inside. Not a creature, a tunnel. A thin hole in the spiral center where there was once only sand. It wasn't there before. You're sure of it? Something has burrowed up, not down. You descend the slope, knees slightly bent, careful not to disturb the grooves. Your boots slide on the loose grains as you approach the middle. The tunnel's only the width of a wrist, but it stretches into darkness, the sand around its lip hardened into a perfect rim. Like it was baked, or used. A lot. You lean in, and the air from within hits your face. Warm, damp, earthy. Definitely not wind. You drop a pebble in. It doesn't bounce. It just disappears. You blink, half expecting an echo. Nothing. Just a dry hush. Then, faintly, a series of tiny clicks from deep below. Rhythmic. Unsettling. You don't whisper this time, you just listen. You think of those stories, half folktale, half field report, about creatures that burrowed beneath ancient deserts, constructing mind burrows. Places not for nesting or food, but processing. Reptilian monasteries. Historians still debate whether the ancient practice of cave meditation, where monks sat in the dark for days to induce visions, was inspired by natural burrows or vice versa. You kneel beside the tunnel and run your fingers around its edge. The sand here is different, mixed with something coarse. Crushed shell. Hardened excrement. You smell it. Resin and heat. This wasn't just a place of retreat. It was a mind vault. You lie flat, ear to the sand, holding your breath. The clicking continues, then pauses, then starts again faster. It's not random. You'd bet your last sip of water this is communication. And so you dig, carefully, quietly. The sand collapses inward faster than expected, and suddenly your arm plunges elbow deep into warmth. It's like sinking into a sleeping body. You jerk back, shaking, but nothing bites. Nothing grabs. So you reach again. This time your fingers graze something not sand. Not bone either. Smooth, layered, like scales. You hesitate, then grasp it gently. It doesn't resist. You pull, and out comes a piece of shed skin, perfectly coiled, like it was discarded with intention. It's dry yet flexible. Intricate markings run along its length. Tiny notches, rows of microgrooves. Almost like writing. Odd fact. Some gecko species shed their skin in perfect spirals and then eat it to recycle nutrients. Yes, but also to avoid leaving trails for predators. But this one wasn't eaten. It was stored. You examine the grooves. They aren't uniform. They change direction mid-shed, forming tight angles here, wide arcs there. You overlay it against your notebook sketch. It matches. The same spiral you saw at the water trap. The same path coil. The same direction. Only this one is wearable. A message you carry with your own fingers. And that's when you realize the tunnel doesn't lead down forever. It leads across. You scoop more sand. The wall crumbles further, revealing a curved passage lined with more hardened skin. It bends gently in a spiral, not just a tunnel, a maze. No, a library. Made not of books, but of instinct. You sit back, breathing hard, dust choking your throat. You're too big to crawl in, but something in you wants to. Wants to shrink down, shed the bulk of being human, and spiral inward, just to see what was so important that a creature with no language spent its life burying it. You wonder now what happens to a lizard's thoughts when it dies. Does the spiral collapse, or does another pick it up? You remember the two lizards spiraling in opposite directions, never touching, always aware? Maybe they weren't just companions. Maybe they were successors. The desert doesn't forget. It just folds memory in loops, hoping something with fingers will come along and understand. You stand, brushing off the sand. You won't dig further. Not now. Instead, you pull the spiral-shaped skin tight and roll it carefully into your pack, placing it beside the stone shard. Artifacts maybe, but they feel more like keys. And behind you, the clicking stops. You don't look back. You just whisper, "I heard you," and keep walking toward the ridge where the sun will rise. You don't remember where the trail began anymore. Not because you're lost, but because the spirals no longer feel like trail markers. They feel like moments, thoughts. One leading into another, not forward or backward, just deeper. You crest a dune with the sunrise at your back, gold spilling across the crests like spilled paint. Before you lies a flat stretch pocked with spirals that don't match any you've seen before. These aren't lizard traced, they're carved. Human-made, sloppy, frantic. You descend carefully. The sand here feels heavier, wetter somehow. Each step clings. You reach the first spiral and crouch. Its grooves are inconsistent, some deep, some barely scratched. It spirals twice, then wobbles into a jagged hook, as if whoever made it ran out of time or courage. Nearby lies a bundle. Tattered cloth, leather string, a satchel maybe. You brush it off, careful not to disturb the sand around it. Inside, bone tools. A vial of red pigment, a shard of shell etched with symbols, arrows, half-formed shapes, human handwriting, and on a strip of tanned hide a drawing of a spiral, lizard at one end, human at the other. You pause, skin prickling. Whoever was here tried to translate, tried to find meaning in motion, and judging by the abrupt end to their spiral, they didn't finish. You search the area and find more of these half-carved spirals. Some filled with stones, others with nothing but old ash. It's as if a group had gathered here all trying to speak the same language but failing to agree on the grammar. Historians still debate whether desert tribes once coexisted with spiral-making lizards or whether the stories are more metaphor than memory. Some researchers argue these spirals were never real, just exaggerated sand behavior retold too many times. But then why are you staring at a lizard-made spiral that's been copied in human hands dozens of times in this very place? You kneel beside the deepest spiral in the cluster. Its center is packed with dark clay. As you dig carefully, your fingers hit something flat wood, carved. You uncover it slowly, a disc blackened by age rimmed with teeth like a gear. On its face, a spiral etched with tiny grooves and in its center a hole. You hold it up to the sun. The grooves catch the light like vinyl. Odd fact. Some desert tribes created memory discs not unlike early phonographs by carving grooves into soft wood, passing a stick or reed across it while chanting. The resulting vibrations were considered sacred, a form of auditory time travel. You run your thumbnail across the grooves and feel it hum. A voice without a throat, a sentence without a speaker. You press your ear to the disc. Nothing. But your heart stutters. Because you realize something terrible and wonderful. The spiral didn't start with lizards. And it didn't start with humans. It started with the land. All of this, every spiral is an echo. Of wind, of water, of seismic ripples no longer remembered. The lizards learned it. The humans copied it. And you're just eavesdropping on a conversation that's been happening longer than species have had names. You pocket the disc and rise. Further along, you spot another spiral. Different, familiar. You rush toward it. It's the rust-colored lizard, the original one. Or maybe not, the markings are similar, but this one has a notched tail and a scar near its shoulder. It's tracing a tight spiral around a broken jawbone. Human. You don't know whether it's mourning or curious, but it completes the spiral, then flicks sand over it. Not to bury the bone, to protect the shape. You sit down cross-legged and wait. The lizard circles you once, just once, and begins a new spiral 2 paces away. You stay still, because now you understand the etiquette. This is not about watching. It's about waiting. You sketch in your notebook. You hum low and steady. The lizard flicks its tail as if listening. It carves 2 loops, then stops. You mimic it with your finger in the sand. Loop, loop, pause, click. You don't know what you're saying, but it doesn't matter, because the spiral says it for you. You return to one of the first spirals you ever saw. Not because you're retracing steps, it's just that the path brought you here curled back around as if your boots were caught in some orbit. The desert dictated long before you arrived. It's not the same, though. The spiral is deeper now, broader, like it's been added to. by whom you don't know. The tail marks suggest a different lizard, narrower, fewer hesitations between turns, almost surgical. You crouch and notice something odd, small bits of charcoal nestled in the grooves, not from wildfire or natural burning, but deliberate placement, dotting the path like breadcrumbs. Someone or something is encoding again. This spiral is not for memory. It's for retrieval. You follow the charcoal. At regular intervals, a small object sits in the sand beetle carapace pebble broken eggshell, each placed on an outer loop like annotations on a diagram, and at the center a fossil, a real one. You gasp. It's the vertebra of a small lizard, calcified but perfectly intact, half exposed in the sand, as if the spiral wasn't just decoration but a frame, a showcase. And suddenly the entire desert feels curated. You run your hand along the spiral's groove, feeling the shift from coarse sand to gritty ash. Someone built this not to bury thoughts, but to summon them. Odd fact. In ancient Persian gardens, spiral-shaped channels were used to direct scent, not water. As the wind passed through them, aromas would concentrate in the spiral's heart, creating what they called the scented silence. The point wasn't to contain anything, it was to call it in. Historians still debate whether the ancient spiral stones found across Africa and the Middle East were artistic flourishes or functional devices for navigation ritual or sensory orientation. Some claim they were meant to stimulate dreamlike states in observers' entrance through repetition. You feel the pull, not hypnotic, more like nostalgic, like remembering a name you never learned but somehow miss anyway. A breeze picks up. The charcoal shifts, and then you hear it again. That click. Same rhythm, same pulse. But not from below, from behind. You turn slowly. There, 10 paces away, is another spiral. This one moving. The lizard is walking the pattern as it builds its claws, scoring tail, gliding head, swaying with each loop. You recognize it now. The younger one, the sand-colored one with the stubbed tail. It glances at you once, then continues. And that's when you realize it's duplicating your spiral. The one you clumsily drew with a walking stick nights ago. It found it, and now it's refining it. You don't know whether to laugh or cry or bow. Instead, you sit, quiet, still. It completes the spiral, then leaves. No flourish, no tail flick of approval, just the motion done and gone. You walk over and crouch beside it. Yours was jagged, uneven, but this version is elegant, balanced, as if it took the impulse behind your thought and gave it form you couldn't. You feel like you've just been corrected by the earth itself, and strangely it feels kind. The day turns hotter. The sun flattens overhead, pressing shadows into puddles beneath your limbs. You know you should seek shade. You should hydrate, but instead you trace the spiral again with one finger. You let it burn. You let the memory etch. You glance up and scan the horizon. Spirals stretch in every direction now, some tighter, some unraveling, like a conversation spilling out too quickly, or maybe a question asked too many times. And then you notice it. One spiral near the edge of the basin doesn't return. It spirals outward and keeps going. It never curls back in. It's the first of its kind. A spiral turned into a path, a gesture of departure. You rise. You know where it wants you to go. Not toward the lizards, not toward the past, but toward something they once considered future. A straight line drawn in through memory. You tighten your pack, run your fingers over the spiral skin inside, and set out not along a loop, but a line. The first spiral meant to be left. You follow it. The spiral that doesn't return. The outlier. The one that said enough. At first you don't know what to expect, maybe another fossil, maybe an animal carcass that broke the pattern. But this isn't that kind of ending. It's not even an ending at all. It's a departure. The spiral gradually unfurls into a long, curling trail, the loops so wide they become arcs. Eventually, the arc straightens. Fully. You walk for 20 minutes before you're certain this is no longer a spiral. It's a vector, and it leads you somewhere unexpected. A ridge rises slowly ahead, low and half buried in sand. From a distance, it looks like another weathered dune. But as you approach, you see it's not sand. It's structure. You reach out and touch it. Stone, not natural, chiseled. You brush away the upper layer and feel straight angles beneath. Carved symbols, faint worn, barely distinguishable. But some remarkably still carry shape spirals, half uncoiled, open-ended. You walk the perimeter. It's not a building, it's a ring, buried in sand 10 meters across with an open center. And at the center, nothing but a flat patch of sand swept clean. As if it's maintained, you step into the ring. It's cooler inside, quieter. The wind seems to skip over the space as though it respects the boundary. The spiral path you followed ends right here, slicing into the edge of the ring like a key into a lock. You kneel and feel it. The sand here vibrates. Not an earthquake, not wind, movement. Slow, subterranean, intentional. You freeze, then press your palm flat to the earth. A pulse, then again, then a break. You realize it's a rhythm. The same clicking cadence you heard before, but now it's coming from beneath you, large, deliberate. Odd fact. The namib, golden mole. A blind, subterranean mammal navigates by detecting seismic vibrations in dunes, reading the shifts in pressure like Braille. Researchers have only recently begun to consider how ancient animals might have used similar methods to communicate spatially, not audibly. Historians still debate whether spiral petroglyphs were meant to be seen or felt. Some suspect they were part of rituals where people lay flat against the earth, interpreting vibrations as prophecy. You don't need to debate it. You're feeling it now. A pulse that's not quite heartbeat, not quite language, but something. You lie down in the center of the ring, pressing your cheek to the sand. Your eyes close, not out of tiredness, but because sight has become irrelevant. And then you see something anyway. Images bloom behind your eyelids, not like dreams, more like memories borrowed from someone else. A coiled tunnel, a lizard with scarred eyes, a storm, a spiral that collapses only to rise again somewhere new. A shimmer of water pooling in a cracked basin, a single human hand sketching loops in a cave wall, over and over, trying to remember. You open your eyes, still in the ring, still alone, except you're not. The sand beside you shifts. You roll quickly, heart leaping, but it's no threat. It's the sand-colored lizard again. Quiet, calm. It walks to the center and stops, looks at you, then begins to spiral inward this time. A tight coil more focused than any before, like it's writing with finality. You stay absolutely still. It finishes the spiral and stands at its center, then lays down, not for sleep, for stillness, like it's recording, not the sand, you. A wind passes over the ring, gentle, almost cold. The lizard clicks once, then closes its eyes. You don't move, because somehow, instinctively, you know to interrupt this is to break something too old to repair. The pulse beneath you fades, replaced by silence so complete it feels like a blanket. The lizard doesn't move again, and neither do you, for a long, long time. When you finally move again, it's because the sun does. The warmth that once coated your back has shifted, and the stone ring now casts a soft crescent shadow over the sand. The lizard remains at the center, still coiled, still unmoving. You don't check for breath. You don't want to know. Not yet. Instead, you begin to spiral outward, not with your feet, but with your eyes. You scan the surrounding dunes, the half-buried petroglyphs, the patterns no storm has dared erase. And that's when it happens. You see movement, not wind, not shadow reflection. Far off across the flats, 3 lizards spiral in sync. They move like dancers across a floor no one else can see. Perfect unison. And then just as suddenly, they stop, freeze, then scatter. You blink shaken. It felt choreographed, like a message sent and received in one shared breath. And then you realize what you just witnessed wasn't for you. It was for it. The one now resting at the ring's center. You crouch again. The lizard's chest rises just once, barely. not dead, dreaming. You feel foolish for almost grieving. It's not sleeping like humans do. It's in something else entirely. A preservation state, a stasis, a ritual. Odd fact. Some reptiles like the sandfish, skink can enter torpor in extreme heat or drought, slowing bodily functions to near zero, waiting days, weeks, sometimes months. Scientists have documented cases of them entering these pause cycles beside spiral burrows, likely as temperature stabilizers. Historians still debate whether ancient desert priests once mimicked these states by fasting in spiral tents. Structures shaped to confuse the wind and silence the senses. You look at the ring around you, it's doing exactly that. No sound, no motion. Just quiet pressure like the air is listening. You back away slowly, careful not to disturb the spiral left behind. You feel like you've walked into the center of someone's memory. Not a place, but an event that loops back on itself endlessly. You reach the ring's edge and pause. Then you do something odd, something that feels right. You begin your own spiral. Small, barely 5 loops. Not for message, not for memory, for mirror, to say I saw, I understood. Maybe. You stand again, you feel dizzy. The world outside the ring suddenly looks too large. So you descend following the uncoiled spiral you saw before. The path continues across newer dunes, now less decorated, more open. And there on the horizon you see it. A line of spiral shadows, faint but consistent, projected by the angle of the sun across shallow markings in the ground. You follow them, one step, another, until you realize they're in motion, but not moving. They appear to move only as the sun does, each spiral shadow flickering, lengthening, tightening, as if they only exist during certain angles of time, like sundials made by memory. You place your hand into one shadow and feel nothing, but your palm trembles. It's not the spiral itself, it's the effect. And here's the strangest part. Each spiral leads you past another. Each shadow deeper, darker, until the last spiral doesn't cast any shadow at all. It just is, perfectly centered in light. And at its middle, you find something buried shallow, a lizard scale, translucent, prism-like, as if it had absorbed too much sun and chose to leave behind only color. You hold it up. It refracts the entire landscape in tiny loops. You whisper, "How many thoughts did you bury?" And somewhere behind you, the wind shifts again, carrying a sound. Not clicking this time. Not insect, not animal. Laughter. Faint, short, familiar. Your own. You didn't laugh, but something caught your memory echo. The spiral didn't forget. It stored even that. You remember the story now, the one about the hunter who learned the spiral. You'd laughed when you first heard it. A folk tale told in the sing-song voice of a desert elder, missing most of her teeth and all of her patience. She said there once was a man who became so obsessed with catching prey, he gave up straight lines. He watched the lizards, learned their movements, and began spiraling through the desert himself. Step by step, circle by circle, his quarry would stop confused. Deer birds, even insects, would pause too long, unsure of direction. And that's when he'd strike. Not fast, just precisely. The story always ended the same way. One day he spiraled so far inward he forgot what he was hunting. Now, standing here, spiral shadows stretching around your ankles like soft ropes. You begin to wonder, was that really a story or a warning? You follow the shadows deeper into a crescent of rocky outcroppings where the light bends strangely and the ground flattens. In the center, there's no spiral. There's a figure. Human, faint, burned into the ground. No bones, no belongings. Just an impression. You crouch and run your hand over it. The sand feels fused, glassy in places, like lightning struck it. Or perhaps heat, not fire, but focus. And then you see them. Spirals. Dozens. Tiny. Around the figure. Perfect, engraved. Like signatures. Not made after he died. Made around him while he stood still. You inhale sharply. Was this the hunter or someone like him? Odd fact. Ancient shamans in some Central Asian cultures were known to stand motionless for hours, sometimes days, while others circled them in ritual chanting, carving drawing patterns in the sand until the central figure was considered unthreaded from the world. Historians still debate whether these were ceremonies for guidance, punishment, or transformation, but the result was always the same. The figure didn't return the same. If at all, you trace the spiral closest to the figure. It leads outward barely, just 2 loops, then a sharp kink, an interruption, a hesitation in stone. You mimic it. 2 steps turn, step again. You don't know why, but something about the gesture feels right, like your body knew before your brain could. Then you hear it. Another spiral, not behind you, not ahead, above. You tilt your head. The canyon wall. You blink, squinting as the morning light shifts. Carved into the cliff, revealed only by angle and shadow, is a vertical spiral. Massive, 4 meters tall, cut deep into the stone. And it's moving. Not literally, but the way the shadow crawls across it gives it motion. 1 loop illuminated, the next darkened, then another. Like watching an eye dilate in reverse. You climb toward it, hands gripping cracks in the stone. Not easy, but the pull is undeniable now. At the base of the spiral, someone carved a mark. Not in language, in rhythm. A notch, then 2, then 5. You recognize it. The click pattern. It wasn't just sound. It was notation. You reach the center and press your palm to the final groove. It's warm. Not sun warm, pulse warm. You pull your hand back like you've touched a memory that wasn't yours. And maybe you did, because the moment you back away, the spiral center begins to shimmer. Not physically, not visually, but emotionally. As if this one thought, the spiral the hunter never escaped, was finally releasing itself. Not as sound, as permission. You sit, you wait, you don't speak. The spiral has a story to finish, and you are the last line. The light doesn't fade, it shifts. Slides down the stone like a slow exhale, washing over each carved groove of the massive vertical spiral until it pools finally in the hollow where your hand just rested. The warmth in your palm lingers even now, like the spiral pressed back. You sit cross-legged at the base of the cliff, watching the shadow move, as if it's alive, curling with the groove rising through the time. It's hypnotic, but not like a trance, more like remembering a dream and realizing it wasn't yours. The canyon falls silent again, but it's not empty. This silence has structure, then a vibration in your chest. Not sound, memory. You're not imagining it. The sensation is physical, like a faint bass note strumming beneath the ribs. You close your eyes and lean into the stone. The spiral hums, and you see it. The hunter, naked to the waist, circling prey through spirals not made of sand, but heat. Mirage layers reflective coils on the desert plain, folding and unfolding as he walked. Every loop tricked the animal. Every curve mirrored its fear. Until the creature gave up, legs wobbling, eyes wide, lost in geometry it couldn't outrun. And the hunter, he stopped spiraling, but only outside. Inside, he never stepped off the path. Years passed, he grew older, slower, but his footprints circled still around memories, mistakes, the soft edge of water lost in drought. Until the day he stood still, and the lizards came, not to feed, not to flee. They spiraled around him, a farewell, a blessing, or a recognition. And then they left. He remained, and slowly the stone beneath him remembered. Odd fact. Quartz-rich sandstone, when compressed by heat and pressure, can retain faint electrical charges. Some indigenous myths speak of talking rocks, sacred places where voices could be heard when pressed upon. Historians still debate whether this was poetic metaphor or an early understanding of piezoelectric effects. You press your hand again. The warmth returns. You whisper, "What did he leave?" And this time something happens. The sand shifts at your feet. A coil, small and faint, curls outward from a crevice. Not drawn by claw or tool, by wind. A perfect spiral of dust, lifting and rotating before settling around your legs like a whispered shawl. You exhale, slowly. You reach down and follow it with your finger. And as you do, you feel the rhythm again. Click, pause, click, click, sweep. You repeat the motion, And the spiral answers, not with noise, but with sensation. Your fingers tingle, your ears pop. You blink and see the spiral glowing not light, not fire, but presence. You understand in a way you can't explain that this spiral, the one carved into stone, buried in sand, traced in lizard tails and lost footsteps, isn't a symbol. It's a portal, not to a place, to a perspective, a way of looking at time that doesn't move forward. That loops, that waits, that returns. You lean back against the rock and smile without knowing why. Somewhere nearby, a breeze flutters past. You don't even turn your head. You know what it is. Another lizard, spiraling. Not around you this time, but because of you. Because you've entered the coil. Not with feet, with memory. And from now on, every loop will have a new echo inside it. Your own. There's nothing left to chase. No trail to follow. No spiral unspun. You sit alone at the edge of the ancient ringstone, warm against your back, the desert stretching out before you like a parchment that's already been written on, just invisible to those who look too quickly. You haven't spoken aloud in hours, maybe days. You don't feel the need to. The desert has given up its voice to the spirals, and the spirals have never used words. You rise, slowly brushing off sand from your knees, though most of it stays embedded. You leave the massive vertical spiral behind, not out of disrespect, but like someone closing a door without turning back. You've been inside its memory, and that's enough. The sun is lower now, long shadows stretching over the sand, like fingers trying to remember what they once held. In your pack, a shard of memory stone, a scale that refracts silence, and a piece of spiral-shed skin. All items you once would have called findings, but not now. Now they feel like borrowed thoughts. You walk again, not in the spiral this time, not along any visible trail, just onward. And even though the ground is blank, your feet fall in curved rhythm. You realize you've absorbed it. The pattern, the arc, the spiral logic. And then, without warning, you stop. No reason, just stillness. Your body feels it first, a hum beneath the ground. Barely there. You kneel. Not far from where you stopped, the sand lifts softly in a breeze, revealing another spiral. This one is your own. You blink. Kneel. The spiral you drew with your stick on the first night, the one you thought the wind had erased. It's here. Refined. Clean. Improved. And at its center, a single item, a strip of dried plant stem tied in a tight coil. Inside it, something tiny. You reach gently. Lift it. A lizard tooth, polished, intentional. It's not a gift, it's a response. You draw in a sharp breath and then laugh softly. That small, strange laugh that breaks into the air when something makes sense in a way no one else would ever understand. They're not archiving your thoughts. They're answering them. The wind curls past again. You stand. You don't need to bury anything this time, because something in the desert already has. And as you turn toward the horizon, feet tracing shallow arcs with each step, you feel your thoughts settle not in your head, but somewhere beneath you. Beneath the dunes, beneath the spirals. The lizards are still out there. Spiraling, archiving, responding. And now, you're one of them.